Welcome back. There you are. You remember that today the hashtag has been Kenya at 60, and I promised that we were having in studio Dr. Ekuru Aukot, party leader of the Third Way Alliance. Thank you very much, Daktari, for finding time to come and be with us.
Thanks, Tom. Inviting me at the 60th anniversary of the Republic.
And I know Gadara has something to say also. Patrick Gadara, author, asante sana for coming. I know you will be telling us whether it's 59 or 60.
Asante sana for having me.
And Dr. Zeden Iraki, he tells me the Z will remain that way for now.
I'm X, not Z.
X, not Z, yes. The X will remain that way.
Yes.
Dr. Iraki, I want to thank you for coming.
Thank you for this midnight train.
So thank you all for coming. Gentlemen, today the hashtag was Kenya at 60. And by the way, before we even go in, there was something you're talking about, a year when we were independent, yet we were not.
Yeah, well, basically what we're celebrating today and what the holiday itself is Jamhuri Day, which is actually Republic Day. Well, we became a republic in 1964, not 1963. So in 1963, we were granted independence through a law that was passed in the UK. It was the UK Parliament that passed our independence constitution. And then for that year, we had the Queen as the head of state, represented in Kenya by a Governor General, Malcolm MacDonald, and he was in charge. He was the commander-in-chief. He appointed the prime minister. He could prorogue parliament. He appointed the cabinet. And if you read, actually, Gigi Karaoke did a very interesting PhD thesis on sort of constitutional development in Kenya. And so he speaks about this here, and he says essentially Kenyatta was MacDonald's foreman. He was powerless, and that's why we had to change the constitution to become a republic, so we could actually have that split with the British. I think for the first year of what we called independence, we weren't really an independent state.
We weren't really an independent state.
Yeah, so this, I would say we are celebrating 59 years of being a republic. We've kind of jumped the gun, but it's fine.
So 1 year. But let's just go back a little bit and look at, those three things that our founding fathers thought were socio-economic threats to the country. And they made certain commitments. The first commitment that was made was the commitment to fight poverty. The second commitment that was made was the commitment to eliminate disease. And of course, the third one was that one of reducing ignorance. And I want to start with the third one because it kind of underpins, the policies in education, all those efforts that government has made that has realized a growth in literacy levels. And we have also seen an expansion in infrastructure, so many number of schools being built. And let me just bring Dr. Aukot. When you look at where we are with the progress that has been made in education, do you think that it is aligned to what the founding fathers had in mind in terms of reducing ignorance?
I think, to be honest with you, I think we are not doing very well because, I like to be very practical. Today, if you ask many people, especially in the villages, in the rural areas, they are not even able to send their kids to school. They lack basically, I went to school during the, let's say the Kanu era. There used to be a scheme called the Kenya School Equipment Scheme back in the days. And it will find you anywhere in the Republic, whatever rural location you are in. And that time, I think there was a degree of equalization in terms of education delivery in the country. Today, it's not the same. Today, people will ask you, I don't have fare to take my kid to school, I can't buy books. That time, we will get, these geometrical sets. We will be supplied with those in books. We used to get them almost monthly. And I think at that time, the degree of education was equal to everyone. Today, education has become very expensive in Kenya. And I think a lot of people really now, I mean, especially people like ourselves, we have to think about, where do I want to take my child to? Do I want to take them to a public school? Or do I take them to a private school? And if you take your child to a private school, you have to cough a lot of money, you know? So education has become so commercialized, and government is actually not regulating it. If we were to draw parallels, say, with a country like Rwanda, Rwanda, in a way, decided that you want a private school, you have to match it with a public school. So it's up to you. But today in Kenya, people are suffering. I mean, we are paying a lot of money, dollar money, to just take our kids to school. So that dream of education, eradicating ignorance through education, is no longer the dream that we had at independence. Yes, and then of course, people go to school, they get degrees, they get certificates, whatever the case may be, but then what next? That's the other question. So government is not able to facilitate, to make sure that you know, the degree you have, the certificate you have, can actually now build you in life. So we haven't really. I think we have lost that dream at independence of eradicating ignorance. Yes, we go to school. I mean, for some of us, but they who've gone to university and even done postgraduate, these days when you hear people calling themselves, I don't know, professors, doctors, you actually even begin to wonder, why do I even have to share a degree with some of these fellows? Because education has been politicized. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry is now calling themselves doctor, so and so, professor, so and so. So I don't know. Are we really?
Let me Doc. Let me bring in Dr. Iraki, who's an economist. And I know later on you will be painting out for us a picture where we are in terms of an economy, because you see Kenya in the sub-Saharan belt is considered one of the largest economies, the fastest to growing, etc. But before we go there, you've heard what Dr. Ri has talked about, and he's not painting a very rosy picture. Are you in agreement? Have we veered off? Do we need to regain our balance? What do you think?
There's some truth, and almost some truth in what he said. And the one that I liked is the founding fathers thought education would be an equalizer. And that's what education is supposed to be, a conveyor belt, so that you can move from poverty to riches, and you can self-fulfill. But as he said, that dream has not been fulfilled. And I thought he would give a very good example. If you look at the president of this country, the deputy president, and the chief what do you call the
chief cabinet
secretary? They all went through public universities. And since he is a public figure, if you look at somebody like the prime cabinet secretary, his father was a minister. But his son still went to public university. And when I was undergraduate, I would have dated a minister's daughter if I wanted, because they were there. But today, we have diverged, as he put it. If you are rich, you go this way. If you are poor, you go this way. So instead of education equalizing us, it is making us less equal. And that should have been the dream of the founding fathers, and that should be the objective of any education system. But you cannot blame parents for taking their kids to private schools because they want the best for them. So I always say that educating people is like a pair of scissors. You need a bit of private sector and a bit of public sector, private and public sector, the way two blades must cut. But in terms of ignorance, I think we have tried, but we have not done very well. And let's also not just blame the government, let's also blame individuals. If I can ask the three of you sitting here, since you left, you graduated from school, how many times have you bought a book? Not on motivation, but a book on an area you're interested in. So one of the reasons why people have become ignorant in education is because of the way it is delivered. We only think about education, about exams. So by the time I finish my KCPE or my KCSE or my undergraduate, I'm so exhausted, I don't want to hear of books. So we become more ignorant. So 5-6 years after graduating from university or from high school, you find us regressing to the mean. So as he put it, you have to remember to keep on telling me, I'm a doctor. I had a master's. I had an undergraduate. Because the way you do things cannot be seen. So I think in terms of ignorance, we need to motivate the next generation so that education is a lifelong endeavor. If you look at what I learned when I was an undergraduate, it is irrelevant because things keep on changing. So if we want to kill ignorance in education, we must make people learn how to learn. So that throughout their life, they're looking for new ideas. They're looking for what is current. But as we talk today, you might have the best schools. You might have whether they are private or public. But as long as kids leave school believing that it is the head of the school, he'll tell you that in our time, people used to have bonfires. So when you're finishing high school, you burn those books to show that I don't want to hear books.
It's a party.
It's a party. You are celebrating the end of schooling. Yet, if you look at countries like China, India, Singapore, and so on, they really focus on making sure that you keep on looking for skills throughout your life. Number two, which is very important, this is the reason why people remain in ignorance, is that we don't teach our kids, our students, some very important skills. I want to give you an example with India. If you go to Silicon Valley today, you find about a third of the people in Silicon Valley are from India. Why? Because they study science, they study technology, they study engineering, they study mathematics. And those skills are transferable. So if you're an engineer, you can practice in Kenya, you can practice anywhere in the world. If you're a computer scientist, you can practice anywhere in the world. But if you look at our education system, it is skewed towards social sciences. And those skills are not transferable. I always crack a joke, don't take offense. If I have a PhD in political science, I can't go to US and say I want to be an MCA because I have a PhD in political science. It's not transferable. And that is why people are not very conducive to chasing ignorance, because they don't see the practicality of what they teach or what they are taught. And finally, before I finish, have you ever wondered why people who have never been to school are able to count money? Somebody cannot write his name, but give him $1 million, he'll count, because he sees the practicality of what you learn. So if you want people not to be ignorant, let's teach them practical skills they can use in school and beyond.
I think, if I may, I've got a bit of a different take on this. I think first, I would dispute the characterization of founding fathers. I think that those are just Americanisms that we take on, because it's not like these guys sat together and decided, let's make Kenya, this is what we want. They had different visions, what Kenyatta wanted, what Mboya wanted, what Odinga wanted. These were different.
What would be the appropriate adjective?
So these are just people who I think were I would call them part of the independence generation, the people who inherited the colonial state. And one of the problems we have with education is that it really ties back to our politics, the fact that we really retained the colonial state the way it was, the way we were given. And even our idea of education was always learning what the whites had, what the British gave us. So we've got to go to school, learn English, and then we'll call ourselves educated. We were taught to diminish the value of local knowledge, of local epistemologies, of how people think. And I think one of the problems that I find is this idea that knowledge equals job skills. So we teach people that, you go to school so you can get a job, or you get education so that you can get a better job, or improve your CV. I think that's a real problem. That for me is really problematic. I think it's about teaching people how to think. What are the things that they value? And allowing them space to be able to investigate and to learn. It's really teaching people how to learn, more than simply giving them sets of facts. I think for a country that has struggled so much with its politics, to diminish the value of social sciences, for me, beats me. I don't understand it. I once had, what's his name? the Ugandan President Museveni,
Yeah.
saying that peace studies those are things that we shouldn't bother with. We should all do STEM, you know, science and mathematics and stuff. And you're asking, your country, it has problems with its politics, has problems with peace, has a history of conflict. You know, how is peace studies not something that's important for
your
you?
country, yeah.
You know, getting your citizens to understand how governance systems work is really important. You know, so when we reduce guys to simply workers, you know, we are just training workers, I think we diminish what we're not really fighting ignorance. You know, and I think we really need to change that and to encourage our kids to imagine new worlds, new ways of being that are not necessarily based on what we think. You know, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, you know, the internet didn't exist. You know, the people who are like making cash off that etc. Well, guys were doing it in their garages.
Yeah.
They're not people doing it in the universities. You know, so it's to really allow people the opportunity and the ability and given the capacity to be able to expand. So you're working on the basics of things. How do you learn? How do you acquire knowledge? Rather than telling them this is the knowledge you need to acquire. I think that's where we sometimes...
You know, Tom,
I
on a very light note, you know the reason today that a Turkana boy from the nomadic community is seated together with a Kikuyu man and a Luo man from Omate. It's because education has equalized us.
Yeah.
You know? So I think there is value in... I don't think our forefathers, well, whatever we call them, forefathers, maybe that's just a bit of a...
Gadara opened
I remember Kenyatta, the former president, who used to speak of forefathers, and he's talking about his dad.
His dad.
So I think... I don't think the founding fathers of this nation, if we can call them that way loosely, really had a philosophical understanding about, you know, the country or even education. I don't think they had.
Yeah. But they spoke about, you know, and they committed. And they kept saying it, and putting it in the psyche of the country, that lazima tutoe ujinga, lazima tutoe hii maneno.
Yeah, but they saw their own people as wajinga. And this is the problem, is they adopted the British perspective. You know, that, oh, these are stupid people and we need to teach them things. We need to educate them.
But
we need to civilize them.
The question for me,
that's how
Tom,
we approached it.
The question for me, Tom and Gadara, is that okay, what informed that understanding that let's you know, eradicate ignorance? What informed it?
Yeah.
I think you're right when you say that we adopted a certain philosophical underpinning of the former colonialists, because the colonialists thought that as a society we needed to be a certain level of understanding of knowledge. But I think, let's be practical. If you look at Kenya, say at 60, because we're talking about Kenya at 60, to be honest with you, people may say all the bad things about the former president Daniel Arap Moi. But I think if there was a time that education was really, really, you know, enhanced in this country, it was during Moi's time.
And in fact, let me just add on to that thought and give you a bit of data, because you see, the total number of primary schools as it stands today is 23,659 primary schools. The secondary schools stand at 9,383. The colleges have gone up since independence to a total of 2,348, and the universities are up to 74 universities. And if you look at the literacy rates, it has also spiked from 20% in 1963 to 82.62% just the other year, 2021. And if you use these metrics, you know, using the rules of scale, Dr. Iraki, that's growth. Somebody listening to this show is saying. I mean,
you know, Tom. Okay, maybe before Doc comes,
Yeah.
You know, I've been a chair of council,
Yeah.
in JQAT, and also been council of University of Nairobi. we need to begin to question the value of our education. What really is the value of education? I mean, having so many universities, secondary schools, so what?
So what?
Yeah?
Yeah.
I've seen universities on the streets.
On top of bars?
On top of bars.
In a shopping mall or center somewhere?
Today, one of the things that really has undermined our education is this so-called parallel program. I don't believe in it. I mean, I went to the University of Nairobi at a time when there was the only one law school. And you had needed to gain a certain percentage or certain grade for you to be admitted.
Yeah.
That was the value of education, the quality of education. Today, it's all over.
Daktari?
Yeah.
Yes.
Quality. Is it no longer currency?
Maybe before we go to quality, let me respond to Gadara's issue about, because the time I raise this issue live or anywhere, people think that I'm diminishing social sciences. That's not what I'm saying. I'm simply talking about the way and the emphasis. If you go to MIT, for example, they still teach social sciences, but the focus is on science and technology. If you go to India, they study social sciences, but the focus is on science and technology. And I want to give you a very practical example, which I wish we can bring in this country. I'm not boasting, I'm just informing you that I taught in an American university. And I was teaching economics to undergraduates. And then I noticed something very strange. The top economic performers in my class were not social scientists. They were actually chemistry and biology majors. So I asked, why are biologists and chemists and computer scientists doing economics? Then I was told the requirement is, if you are majoring in humanities, you must do some courses in natural sciences so that you see the other side. And if you are majoring in natural sciences or engineering or sciences, or whatever it is, you must do some social sciences, English, literature, economics, and so on, so that you see the other side. So in no way am I diminishing that social sciences are useless. I'm not saying that. It's a question of emphasis.
Fair enough.
I think your data is correct, that if you look at the bigger picture, we need to be less ignorant because there are more schools, there are more graduates, and the literacy level has gone up. So what we should be emphasizing are two things from Daktari here, the quality and the content. So if you go from primary up to university, what content did you go through? What skills? What knowledge did you learn? Is it relevant to the current and the future circumstances? And I want to give you a good example. And don't take offense.
As we go into our first
if you ask any student in Kenyan high school, they will tell you about Sijandropas. They even tell you what he ate.
And evolution. Yeah.
But if you ask the same students why Israel and Hamas are fighting, they don't. So why should we spend so much money talking about the Arab man where we don't know enough about the modern man? And that's what I'm talking about.
But isn't that the whole thing of, if you look at our politics and how it runs, and we say people need to be engaged and working, but we don't give them the tools to actually understand it. So like the discussion we had at the start of this, that's a simple history thing.
That's exactly what I'm saying. For example,
is it republic, is it independence? And what does that then mean for how we conceive of the country that we live, the politics that we have? So I wouldn't even go so far as Israel-Hamas. I'd be saying, in Kenya, how do we understand our own political state? And the sort of changes that we want to have. And I don't think we have actually enabled the populace to be able to engage with it. I think, in fact, we have sort of made it almost a limited pool of people who would engage with it. By the way, I don't think it's bad to have many law schools. There should be many good law schools. I mean, the opportunity should be there for many people to engage with it. And to come in and to be able to, to work with it and come with new ideas from there.
And there's also, of course, that conversation around, are we heavy consumers of knowledge, or do we want to also think around whether we start producing knowledge? Let's do this. Let's take a break. Right? Let's just breathe in a little bit. And when we come back, we're going to look at the other aspects, including heritage, culture, economy, and all that. Stay with us. You're watching The Scorecard.
Cheza Loto Moto.
School fees ya msichana imemalizwa.
Loto Moto. May the Almighty God bless you. Keep on doing the right thing.
Cheza Loto Moto. Shinda pesa moto moto.
Did Ricardo call you? Why did he call and look for you?
I don't know what you're talking about.
I heard you.
You ever once thought that Magdalena spends all day in that room of hers and that she's the only one among us who seems to be going crazy?
Your beloved brother-in-law and all of Puebla will find out who you really are.
What are you doing?
No, what were you looking for?
Magdalena put that there so that you would start to doubt me.
She is a very dangerous woman.
Welcome back to Scorecard. Remember, I'm sitting in for O'Brien Kimani and Marie Iyambo. Let's now start off the second part by looking at the health sector. 6 decades later, we have 5,000 facilities, a bit of data here, compared to 900 facilities, which we had 30 years ago. And of course, we are grappling with issues of cholera here and there. But if you look at the rules of scale, that is progress.
Yes, I mean, again, it depends on what you're measuring. So if you're measuring buildings, if you're measuring facilities, workers even, you'd say, yes, there's been progress, you know.
And doctors.
But the question, again, is do you have a healthier populace? That's what you should be asking. You know, and what are the measures for that? Because in the end, all of these facilities should be there to serve a purpose, and the purpose is that you have healthier people. You have people who have better access to healthcare. You know, I think it is not that there hasn't been progress. There hasn't been sufficient progress. I think it's been really concentrated in particular places. You know, when you had after devolution came in that counties were having the fastest cesarean section ever, you know, performed in this county, you have to think, you know, that's a huge failure, you know, that we have. So we can say, yes, we have many hospitals. Where are those hospitals? You know, does the ordinary average Kenyan have access to it? You know, or are we just setting up many private clinics that charge way more than we can do? You know, and I think health-wise, you know, things like universal healthcare, you know, are things that from the start we should have
fixed it,
focused on. You know, that shouldn't be a debate we're having now. You know.
Dr. do you think it's too late to start addressing those issues? Because the other day we saw His Excellency the President roll out a number of healthcare workers to go out to the four corners of the country. In your view, and you know, you have been on the presidential ballot, you know, and health is obviously one of the areas I'm sure you studied very, very keenly. Have we gained ground?
You know, for me, I'll look at it from a very, very practical point of view, which is that can Kenyans afford healthcare? Today, it's increasingly expensive. In fact, if we have to be very honest, all of us here, we are fundraising every day for medical bills. Every day.
Just check your WhatsApp groups.
Exactly. Just check our WhatsApp group. I mean, people asking for basic things. So for me, I will even say that I don't think we have really achieved. We are declining in terms of, for example, healthcare, because people are not able. And you know, when we were doing the Constitution in 2010, one of the things that we try to underscore is that, for example, emergency treatment. We say that, you know, if you're in an emergency situation, money should not be a factor in the first instance. But today, let me tell you, if you're an accident victim, you will die waiting to be treated in any hospital. So there's a disconnect between, for example, government policy and achieving healthcare on the one hand. So that, you know, the ordinary Kenyan actually is not able to actually afford Medicare in this country. It's not possible. Because, I mean, let's just remind Kenyans, during the COVID situation, you know, even our NHIF was not working for Kenyans. It was commercialized. So then you wonder, I mean, if in such an epidemic, an emergency, the government of the day cannot come through for you, then what is the point of discussing about health, Medicare or healthcare in a country? So I don't think really we have achieved that. I mean, the situation is getting worse and worse. A lot of Kenyans, many Kenyans, I mean, millions and millions of Kenyans are not able to afford Medicare.
Healthcare. Let me just read for you, and I agree with you, COVID was, of course, an emerging issue, and we were learning quite a number of things as it was emerging. But if you look at the response to epidemics like polio, it was first detected in Kenya in 1929. In 1996, Kenya conducted its first national immunization campaign. Today, we are polio-free. That's a win. That's data. Data is oil. All right? TB, Kenya's top 4 killers. In 2020, it accounted for 3.2% of all deaths. More than 120,000 people develop TB every year. There's also the HIV question. 1984, the numbers were up there. But we have seen the graph drop. And if you ask scientists or even economists like Dr. Iraki here, they'll tell you that's the matrix of measuring whether we are gaining ground in the wrong direction or we are making progress. Whether slow, but the progress is being...
I think
before Doc comes, and maybe we can explain it from an economic perspective. I like to measure progress from a micro perspective. If today you tell me at each and every ward of this country, the 1250 wards, that you can actually access Medicare, and you're able to buy, to go to a dispensary and get drugs, then that for me is progress. We can talk about macro. I mean, I'm not an economist, maybe Doc here can explain further. You see, we can say, oh, we have this, at the national level, but I'd like to measure it from an individual perspective. Is a Kenyan at that village level able to actually go to a dispensary clinic and actually buy medicine and be treated? That for me will be the measure of success.
And by the way, Dr.
Yes.
Before you come in, he's just reminded me, I mean, a few years back, you could walk into a fully functional dispensary and you're given medicine for free. They had the GOK,
I was a victim of that. I just walked to a dispensary. It doesn't matter the ailment. And there was never shortage of drugs or medicine.
Yeah.
You just get treated and go home. And you pay nothing.
So yes, there's a lot that has been achieved in the area of health. But what do you think?
So in my opinion, and I agree with him, that the ultimate measure of success of health provision is not to look at the micro, it's look at the micro. Because
the person at the ground
there is you. Yeah. How can you get that? Can you get that particular medication? Can you get that emergency treatment if you had an accident or even if you fell sick? But I think when you look at the health, you need to focus more on access than anything else. So you may have all those investments, but do people have access to health? And access means it doesn't matter whether you are rich or poor. You should be able to access health, whether it's emergency or not. Because if you look at economic perspective, a healthy nation is a productive nation. So if people are not very healthy, they are not productive, and the economy slows down.
Yeah.
And maybe the president has an idea when he talks about universal health care. Because if we were to make everybody healthy, then let's have universal health care. So that it doesn't matter which county I am. I don't need to worry that I should go back to my county to get health services. It should be universal. And it should not be dependent on whether I'm rich or poor, whether I come from such a county or not. But there's another type of health that we seem to ignore, the emotional health. Because a lot of people are healthy, they are not breathing, they don't have an ailment, but emotionally we are not very, very healthy.
What do you mean by that?
Simple. How many of you can be very rich and very affluent, but are you happy? Are you satisfied with your life? Because that's one area we always forget. That health is not just about lack of biological ailment, but also the emotional part of it, which we should put a lot of emphasis on. But if you look at the history of medicine in the last 100 years, our longevity has gone up in Kenya from 40-something to about 60-something. But one of the biggest drivers of that longevity has actually been improvement in hygiene, to make sure people have access to water, people have access to nutrition, very basic things. So we talk big, but we go back to what Dr. is saying here, the micro part of it, the basics. So when we think about improving health, let's start with the basics. Then we should be able to win this one health. But we think too much about, are you able to pay for insurance, are you able to pay for this? But it should be much easier and more cost effective if we focused on those basics. hygiene and nutrition. Because if you eat well, you're unlikely to become ill. If you have access to water, you're unlikely to have all those waterborne diseases and so on.
Okay.
So before we become complex, let's start with the simple things.
So preventive rather than curative.
Yeah, the measure is actually whether you have a healthy population. So it's not how many hospitals you have.
That's true. I agree with you.
What you want is healthy people. And I completely agree with the. It's really about getting the basics right. Having people having access to, as you say, clean water.
Nutrition,
people knowing what nutrition
food.
is. And not just access, knowing, what's a balanced meal. What does it look like? We're now moving into the era of people getting lifestyle diseases because they're not eating well. They're like me. They're expanding. And things. So, these are the things that we need to really tackle, and that is really not about having hospitals.
It's deeper than that.
It's more about people understanding, how do you conduct yourself in a way, or do you live in a way that minimizes the chances that you'll get ill.
Okay.
And then, of course, acknowledging people will still get sick. And that's where then the curative aspect of it is there, that you've got to have the facilities that would then take care of people and access to them. Okay. One final thing I would say is, and this has been quite prevalent in the health sector, is we diminished the value of local knowledge, local medicine. I went to Cambry a few years back, and they're showing me how they've been working with these herbalists to sort of try and package the stuff that they have, because there's knowledge there that's been gathered over generations, and it is people who have learned this works, that doesn't work, etc. And they're trying to kind of systematize that, and that's a really important thing. We have 40,000 of these herbalist people walking around. Lots of our baths, are being done by midwives who are essentially home trained, and stuff. So we do have workforces. But we ignore them because we say, oh, that person doesn't have a certificate. They haven't been to medicine school, to medical school and stuff.
Why do you think we have that attitude towards issues? Well, because, for example, Dr. Okot here and myself, if we were members of parliament and we walked into parliament dressed like this, they would cite us for being dressed inappropriately.
It's all a colonial mentality. It goes back to what we had said in the first segment. That we adopted a particular viewpoint, a particular perspective that diminished everything we had. It's not a coincidence that most Kenyans are taught not to value history, because they're being told that history, where you came from, Kitambo, has nothing to offer you. All you have to do is now get the knowledge that the British came with. And that's what we are being pushed to do, rather than to think back and to ask, how did those guys deal with disease?
Before this other knowledge came
systems.
in.
Exactly.
What were their
systems? What are their systems of education? How do they understand? We're taught to think of them not as people who are struggling with ideas. They were just like animals operating. But the fact is, these guys had their own thoughts, had their own philosophies,
they had their own solutions to their problems.
Exactly. And those can actually be things that would really inform for us, how we can go back and borrow from those and adapt them for.
Let's hear Dr.
For me, my listening to Daktari and Gadara, I think there's a fundamental point that they're all making, which is that what really is our value system as a country today, especially from a political standpoint. If we are not able to message certain, certain things in our society to change society, we need to begin to question ourselves, what is really our value system? And I'm reminded, sometimes back when Tony Blair was the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, he reflected very hard on the health budget. And he found out that one of the things that was affecting the health budget in the UK was obesity. And obesity was caused by the manner in which our bad manners lifestyle, what kind of food that we're eating. And you know, from a political point of view, from a prime minister saying to people, you know, you need to think about exercising, you need about eating healthy. But we are not seeing this messaging from our politicians, our political leadership. And I think I say this because, for me, we are questioning, we are missing what I would probably characterize as a value. Even if you look at leadership, for example, I see leadership in Kenya or in any country as a value system. It must cascade downwards, right from the very top. And you have to talk about certain things, certain behaviors. We have to change our mannerism. Today, we sweep under the carpet the fact that there's mental illness in this country.
Mental health. And it's blowing up.
It's a crisis.
It's in the lips of everybody. It's in the lip of...
And the statistics are there to show. But we are not hearing this from the leadership of our country saying, you know what, we need to do things in a certain different way. Mental illness is a crisis in Kenya today.
Although I think I've seen some initiatives, you know, from the...
No, there have been, but my argument would be, my point, and this is where I would sort of diverge a bit from what Ekuru is saying, is I think that it's not just about telling people eat better or value things better. You've got to look at the circumstances that they exist in and what are they incentivized to do. So obesity is a global problem, but it's a global problem because we've changed the way we produce food. You know, we've left it largely to private companies, private individuals, and they have concentrated on a few foods where they can make money.
Economics.
You know, exactly. And so you go to the UK, you know, if you actually try and eat healthy, it's bloody expensive, you know, but you can subsist by going to McDonald's or, you know, on a daily basis. And that's the problem. That's the problem they are having, is that we have structured our economies in certain ways, and it goes back to your idea of values, what we want. We have structured them in a way that incentivizes people to go and eat in particular ways, you know, makes it cheaper for them to do that and makes it very expensive for them to live well.
The point I was trying to draw is that, you know, it's fine. You have your choices. You can eat McDonald's or whatever it is, KFC. But I think what I liked about, for example, that example of Tony Blair is relating it to how you govern a country. Because you're saying,
Dr. Iraqi talked about it.
Yes, you are saying your mannerism or your lifestyle is actually affecting the health policy in the country. At the end of the day, I, as the prime minister or president, I'm not really taking the hit because there's an effect on the health.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. I think that
before let me because I wanted Gadara to make a comment on how far he thinks the fourth estate has come. 59 years later. But let's have Dr. Iraqi, and I just want to read this for you. Okay. Kenya's economy has grown from US dollars 1.16 billion. That was in 1966. Zamani sana hii. It grew to US dollars 113.42 last year, 2022. 16.1% of Kenyans are living below poverty line. That's under less than $1 per day in 2019. But there is a significant drop from 46% in 2005 and 36% in 2015. Again, the rules of scale. You can see the graph going up.
I totally agree with you.
Economist.
Yes, but
have you read the president's speech?
But maybe before we go to that, I want to clarify something on health, because when we talk
health is important.
When we talk about access to nutrition and access to basics like water, we also forget that people should also have access to information so that they know what is nutritious, what is not nutritious.
Right.
They know the effect of consuming contaminated water, and also what we are calling the class system. And I want to give you a good example, Tom.
Yeah.
I went to a function earlier this year, and one county executive, I will not disclose the county he came from.
Please don't.
He was very disappointed
You can tell us the county, but not the...
I'll tell you for security reasons. But his problem was that his county doesn't have one of these fast food restaurants that I'm not going to name again. I'll not give them free advertisement. And he was very concerned that on Valentine's Day, you can't take your friend out to those fast foods. Because to him, and this is a very senior person in the county, to him, eating fast food is a sign of affluence. But if we started teaching kids much earlier that this is not affluence, this is not healthy, they would change. And let me finish with giving you a very good example. When I was in class 5, my science teacher told us to bring a cigarette and a white handkerchief to school. They told us to sit in a circle and light a cigarette and breathe through a white handkerchief 2 or 3 times. And the handkerchief had some soot. And he asked us, imagine what will happen to your lungs if you smoked all your life. And very few of my classmates smoke. So that is the information I'm talking about. Let people have information about nutrition, about basics, about water and so on, and they'll change. Let me go back again to your question about economics.
Yeah, because you're the expert.
There's no question about it, that material-wise, we are much better off than those who came before us. There's no question about it. If I compare my father, my grandfather, and myself, we are all materially endowed. But the question is, are we happier than them? Are we more satisfied with their lives? Because it's very easy to give these numbers and say that the average per capita income has gone up, the longevity has gone up. But from where I sit, I always see economic progress as people who are happier and having more fulfilled lives. And this is what amazes people who come from the western part of the world. They come to this country and find out, how come you people, you are so poor but you are so happy? How come you look so satisfied with your lives? Because at the end of the day, it's not about affluence, it's not about material, it's about people being satisfied with their lives. So I agree with you that we have improved.
Okay.
But have we reduced inequality? Because that's one big problem. Because we might have very good data, but only a few people are doing very well.
Let me ask you, Dr.
Yes.
So, because I'm listening very keenly to what you're saying.
Yes.
So, is it time we transition from GDP as a matrix of measuring growth and went to GDH, so that we look at gross domestic happiness?
Yes, that definitely. I'm one of the.
It works in some countries, isn't it? I think was it in Bhutan or where?
I'm one of the people who have advocated that.
Yeah.
Because the reason why you work so hard and accumulate money is that you can have choices and you can be happier. And that is the worst part about corruption. That you accumulate all that money, you steal from us, but you're never happy. You don't want me to visit your house because I might ask you, and you want to have fewer friends because they don't want to question you.
Let me ask you, Dr.
Yes.
Now that you have brought in the big C, you know, this big C is in the lips of many people. Today I was listening to the president's speech, and he gave his personal undertaking.
Yes, he said that.
You know, to support all the anti-corruption efforts. But then I listened also to the chair of the Anti-Corruption Commission, David Oginde. And this is what he said. Let me just read it verbatim. He said, if we are given full powers and authority and capacity enabled, we will set the nation back on track. I'm trying to reconcile these two statements.
I don't know. Do you want him to go first or I go?
Doc.
Yes.
Shoot.
By the way, I haven't heard about Oginde for a very long time.
Yeah. But he said today that quiet. If we are given full powers and authority and capacity enabled, then we will set the nation back.
Did he specify who is supposed to give him that power and authority?
That's what I want you to reconcile for me.
It's supposed to be the parliament. The parliament should give the anti-corruption powers and authority, maybe to prosecute, to arrest. He's a lawyer. But I don't see the parliament doing that because so many heads will roll.
Doc, your comments on that one. This big C thing.
No, to be honest with you, I think, in fact, now in the context of, say, where are we as a country at 60, I think we have a very rogue executive. I mean, I hope I'm not being too wild about this. We have a very rogue executive that has actually controls parliament. The only institution right now they're not able to control, but of course they're disobeying, is the judiciary.
Oh, that's the context. Okay.
Yes. So when Oginde says, if we are given power, by who? I wish Bishop Oginde could actually demonstrate that they are doing this, but they are being frustrated by so and so.
Yes.
If he were to able to tell Kenyans, I am actually trying to prosecute so and so, but somebody is interfering with me, then I would buy his statement.
The highest office on the land today came out categorically and said nobody will interfere with that war.
Let me tell you.
No individual.
You know, when you think about President William Ruto, he actually epitomizes part of the problem that we have in this country. You know, I mean, not KBC, those are my own words. I think he epitomizes, because William Ruto doesn't really act according to, I mean, doesn't deliver what he says. Too many promises, but no action. Unfortunately, when I think Oginde says that, it means somebody somewhere in the executive, it cannot be anywhere else. It's somebody in the executive that's actually frustrating his effort. But Bishop Oginde also needs to tell us what is it that he has done or he is doing that's being frustrated.
And
he needs to account for it.
Yeah, because the president has said, listen,
but the presidents always say.
Nobody. And that is what is on record. And he said it today, he repeated it again. And Oginde should be telling us.
These presidents have been saying this since 63, since 64.
Yeah.
You know, so this is not news that they're all coming, we have zero tolerance for corruption.
Okay.
I think there is a fundamental problem with how we see what we call the war on corruption. We think that we're going to end corruption by prosecuting people, you know. But for as long as the rewards of corruption outweigh the risks of it. You know, you're not going to jail enough people, you know, to do it.
So it's systemic.
It's systemic. Our country, we've got to accept it and we've got to acknowledge it, was built on corruption. Corruption is not something that Africans brought. It came with a colonial regime. You know, as far as you read the book Looters and Grabbers by KBC, you know, he shows how in as far back in 1908, you know, people are saying you can't get out of your house without a policeman asking you for a bribe. You know, the way the state was structured was so like chiefs were told collect tax, give us so much. Let
me ask you,
so,
Tom.
Let me finish. I'm coming to the present.
Yeah, as we wind.
So the corruption is systemic. You know, it's part of it. The way we attack it, the way we approach it, is we think that it's just prosecute people. I think start looking at what are the avenues for corruption that exist. What are the incentives for corruption? The president cannot say, at Yapana, I have nothing to do with it. You know, it's his job to see loopholes. It's his job to implement policy, to come up with policy and implement it. You know, that then stops corruption happening, not to wait for somebody else to punish it.
Your final comments as we wind up.
Let's be brutally honest. So long as you have got corrupt individuals forming government, corruption will be part and parcel of
that I would dispute. The problem isn't corrupt individuals.
No.
The problem is a system that incentivizes corruption.
Yeah, but
and that is why every time we get good people we think are good, we think have integrity, and we put them in, immediately they start changing, because the system we are putting them into is one that is designed to corrupt. It is designed to get them to behave in these ways.
Okay, let's wind this up.
But see,
let's wind this up, Dr.
Listen, let's deconstruct institutions. You cannot talk of institutions in isolation of individuals. So it's individuals actually that make those institutions. If Kadara today we put you in charge of a certain institution, but you don't give
co-opted.
Because the system is set up.
This is the problem that we have.
To talk of a system,
all these guys we put in.
A system is an abstract reality. But we deconstruct institutions. We go back to the individual. Daktari here, and as an economist, if we are put him in charge of an institution, we want to see how is Daktari managing that institution. So, you know, to hide behind the idea of a system is actually an excuse.
All right, folks, here's what I want to do. I want you guys to just go back a little bit and now look at us in the fourth estate. 59 years, according to Gadara, 60 years, according to Dr. Kot, and Dr. Iraki. Do you think the media has done what it should do? Is the media, has it played a significant role 60 years on?
My observation is that since we got the new constitution, I think the media has enjoyed its freedom. It has exposed a lot of things that could never have been exposed. And the media has always been the oil of democracy. It has been the oil of progress.
Thank you for keeping it short.
And that must not be compromised.
Thank you for keeping it. Dr. What are your thoughts?
For me, one of the challenges with the media is ownership. Who actually owns the media in Kenya, and how are they messaging? How are they exposing societal issues? You can see, for example, the oscillation. Some of the media houses, like you can see, for example, Nation Media House, Citizen. Sometimes some of the editorial is almost informed politically, you know. So I think the question is the media ownership vis-a-vis the political connection.
Gavara.
I think
as we wind up.
I think there's been some improvement, as with everything. But I think our media, to a large extent, really does the country a disservice. I think they have been part and parcel of the conditioning people not to really think about their problems or solve problems, but to see them through the prism of politicians and to assume politicians' problems are our problems. You know, so we keep fighting for Kuru's, career, and we are told, oh, if he gets in, then our community has been gifted or has improved. It hasn't. If Kuru has gotten something, it doesn't mean that I have. I think we've gone away from a battle of ideas to very much a personalization and polarization of politics, and that is largely driven by the way media frame stories. You know, that they talk about what they're interested in is the fight between the
two protagonists.
Between protagonists, rather than what they are fighting about, which is what should be the meat of what we should.
I
think
we have to bring it. Tom, can I ask you a question, Tom?
I'm so happy.
Why is it that, for example, media houses reduce a discourse around our country to personalities? Look at the headlines, even tomorrow.
But we are all familiar, gentlemen, that now we are moving into the space of solution journalism. we have realized that the two protagonists, the voltage is too high. So Gavara is aware of that. Gavara is aware of that.
I don't think our media is moving towards that.
Can I also ask a question before we finish?
Yeah, as we wrap up.
Is Kenya 60 years old, or 103 years old, or 120 years old?
According to Gavara, it's 59.
No.
Kenya became a nation in 1895.
59 as a republic. But we became Kenya as a colony in 1920.
103 years.
So it
but
depends.
Became a protectorate in 1895. So you want 28 years.
No, actually, why does somebody have to define our age as a country? We existed even before colonialism. So
So gentlemen, on that time note, I want to thank you so much. We have to bring this to a close. Mr. Patrick Gavara, author, commentator, many thanks indeed for finding time to come and be with us. I really enjoyed this conversation. Dr. N. Iraqi, XN Iraqi. XN Iraqi.
Thank you for converting me into a night learner.
I want to thank you for coming through. Honestly, we don't take it for granted. And of course, Dr. Ekuru Okot, party leader, Third Way Alliance. Thank you, gentlemen. Well, I want to thank you on behalf of the entire team on the scorecard bench. Thank you for watching. My name is Mboya. I've been sitting in for Brian Kimani and Marie Yambo. Good night from Nairobi, Kenya.